Hello and good day to you. We're going to start a new series. This series is about David's Tabernacle. And the point of the series is we're going to talk about change. And so I'm going to tell a little story from the Walker family. We have this saying, we got it from a movie. I don't remember which movie, but it says, we make our plans, we execute our plans, and when our plans go off the rails, then we improvise. And so that's how we do it. Now, God is different from us. God is higher than us. As the heavens are above the earth, so His ways are higher than our ways. And so His way is to start with plan A and give plan A an opportunity to work out. But then He has plan B, then He has plan C, then He has plan D, then He has plan E, and He has plan F, and He has more plans than the coronavirus has variants. And so the reality is, God's never caught by surprise because He anticipates the need for change, even in the midst of it looks like everything's going well. So right now, we are in a place of change, and spiritually, God is going to change how He comes to us and what He expects from us and what we're going to experience with Him. And so this is to preface that. That change was indicated when we studied the resurrection to the ascension, and now it's going to be more elements of that are going to be exposed as we study the change from Moses' tabernacle onto David's tabernacle. And so we're going to start at the starting point. We're going to look at the original covenant and how it was to be, how it was going to work. So we're going to start with a principle, though. The principle comes from Romans chapter 8, verse 3. For what the law could not do, weak as it was. Okay, now let's get that straight. The law itself was not weak, but the law was weak as it was executed through the flesh. Okay, so what the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, God did, sending His own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and as an offering for sin, He condemned sin in the flesh. Okay, so God had a plan. He executed the plan. And if man had been strong enough and righteous enough, then that plan would work. But when you mix the law with the flesh weakens the law to the point it can't do the job God wanted it to do. And so we're going to talk about what that job is in other upcoming lessons. But right now, we're going to look at the original covenant. And that comes from Exodus chapter 19. So we're jumping to Exodus chapter 19. And we're going to look at verses 3 through 9. And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him. Oh, let's switch glasses here. And from the mountain, saying, Thus you will say to the house of Jacob, and tell the sons of Israel, You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now then, if you will indeed, okay, here's the elements of the covenant agreement, obey my voice, and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. Well, that's the indication that what's happening here is not just for their sake, it's actually for the whole world, and in reality it's for the nations. And so you shall be to me kings and priests in a holy nation. And these are the words you will speak to the sons of Israel. Now, let's get this in mind. God says Israel will be kings and priests of a holy nation, and they will be an example to the other nations, to the whole world. So this is happening for the world's sake. Okay, so Moses came and called the elders of the people, set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded him, and the people answered together and said, All that the Lord has spoken, we will do. Okay, so this is the context of the covenant. God is going to make the rules, and the people will follow the rules. And they have agreed for the outcome. They're willing to follow these rules. These rules are honorable, realistic rules, and they've agreed to follow them. And so that's the point of the first covenant. God makes the rules, people follow the rules. Okay. And so we're going to go to verse 9. And Moses said, and the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I shall come to you in a thick cloud in order that the people may hear when I speak with you and may believe in you forever. Then Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments. So they're going to get ready to have an encounter with the Lord. And so we've gotten the news. The news laid out the plan, and the people have accepted the plan. It is a good idea. Okay, and so we're going to go to verse 20, 18 to 21, and we're going to see how the plan works out. You can read the whole story, and it would be good for you, but we're going to pick out these elements because these elements point to something. Okay, and so verse 18 to 21 of chapter 20, switching glasses. And all the people perceived the thunder and the lightning flashes and the sound of the trumpet and the mountains smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. Then they said to Moses, speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But let not God speak to us, lest we die. Now I'm going to stop right there. Okay, they've made an assumption. They've seen something, and they're assuming that this thing that they've seen is so dangerous that if they try to be in relationship with it, which is God, in this form, that they will die. Okay, they've made an assumption. Okay, there's nothing that proves that to themselves as an assumption. They're assuming they will die. Now, if they thought about it logically, Moses has been talking to this God and referring messages to them, and he has not died. And so there's a dysfunction going on here. So let's finish this up. And Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Now that's very common in the Bible, telling God's people, do not be afraid, because basically the faith issue is a fearful issue. And it says, do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, in order that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you may not sin. Okay, so God understood the situation, and he wants to come before them so powerful, okay, so powerful that they will fear him and not sin against him. And that fear will remain with you. And that fear would be a powerful thing, because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And eventually that fear of the Lord turns into a reverence for the Lord, and it turns into a love of the Lord, because it says in the New Testament that perfect love casts out fear. So at some point we fear the Lord, and at another point we've learned to love the Lord, and that love casts out the fear. And now we've accomplished what God wants. He wants to be loved. Okay, so this is a step to getting to where he needs to be. They need to see him and to fear him, so that the fear will remain with them, and they will not sin. Okay, so the people stood at a distance while Moses approached the cloud where God was. So Moses is going to walk up and talk to God right in the midst of all this dangerous stuff. Okay, and they should be saying to themselves right now, well, how come he's not afraid? How come he's walking right up there and we were afraid? Well, we'll see some elements of that in another reading. So here we go. And so we go to Exodus 24, verse 3. So God says a lot of things to Moses. He brings the information back. And so in Exodus 24, 3, then Moses came and counted to the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances, and the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord has spoken, we will do. Okay? So they've now agreed to the situation. They've agreed with all the regulations, but they're on an intercessory level. They're not dealing directly with God. They want someone to go to God and that someone bring that information back to them, and then they will receive that information, and then they will try to do what God said. Okay? They agree to do what God said, but it's being relayed to them by another person, not by God personally. Okay? So that's a breakdown in the whole thing. So they're going to require a priesthood, and we're going to see a little bit later where that priesthood comes from. But I'm going to show, we're going to jump ahead, and that jump ahead is going to jump ahead to Hebrews and to the new covenant. So in Hebrews, when we're discussing the new covenant, We're going to go to chapter 8. Okay, here we are. We're going to go to chapter 8, and we're going to look at the elements of the new covenant, and we're going to see how the breaking down of the first covenant already is going to point to its failure, because the new covenant has elements that we have to recognize. The new covenant that we operate under starts out verse 8. We're going to read verse 8. For finding fault with them, he says, verse 7. If the first covenant had been faultless, there would have been no occasion for another. Okay. For finding fault with them, he says, behold, the days are coming when I will effect a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Jacob. Okay, so there's coming a day, because that one is going to fail. He already saw it was going to fail, and he's already made provision. This is written in Jeremiah, so it's a long time away. And we're going to look at verse 10, where it says, and this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my laws into their minds. I will write them upon their hearts. Okay, here's that real important element. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Okay, that's the relationship that all this has to develop into, the God-people relationship. Okay, and what's an element of that? Well, an important element of that is in verse 11. And they shall not teach everyone his fellow citizen. So they won't have a priest, they won't have a Levite, they won't have that people in between that they're asking for at the first covenant. They want somebody between us and God because he's scary. Instead, there's going to be this process, and all shall know me from the least to the greatest of them. So everybody is going to not need an intercessor person between them and God. That's the end game. The end game, God-people relationship, law in their hearts, and that they don't need an intercessor between them and God. That's the end game. Okay. So how is that? Let's look at an illustration of that. We're going to turn to Matthew 16, and this is a fairly famous story, Matthew 16. And let me get to it. It's a story about Peter, and Peter says the things that nobody else will say. So we're going to read 15 through 18. And so Jesus said to all the disciples, who do you say that I am? Okay. So he's asking a general question and starts a conversation. And some said John the Baptist, others said Elijah, whatever. So they're just reporting the news, okay? And then he said, but who do you say that I am? Okay? So one person pipes up, it's Simon Peter, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Okay? Very impactful. Now that statement is very impactful, okay? And Jesus answered, said, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. Okay, so Jesus just pointed something out. Okay, so Peter, you learned this. Okay, you didn't learn it from the people around you, and a person did not communicate this to you, but it was communicated to you directly from your God in heaven. See, that's the important aspect of that. It came directly to you. Okay, and so this is so important. I want you to listen to the following statement. I say to you that you are Peter. Peter is Petros, which means little rock. And upon this rock, and then he says the word Petra, which is a gigantic rock. Okay, so Peter is a small illustration of something that's gigantic. And the gigantic thing is that communication from God, which is the element of the new covenant that we just read about in Hebrews. That element is what's going to be, we'll just read it. That huge element, on that rock, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not empower it. Okay, so Peter is a small illustration of a bigger principle. Bigger principle is people will hear God talking to them personally, very personally, and that's the basis of building the church. God building the church. Maybe we build a church whatever way, through public relations or whatever. Okay, 7 principles to build a great church. Okay, but God builds it by people hearing the word of God from God. okay, and not requiring somebody else. So that's one of the changes that's coming, because right now it's not like that. Maybe in your church it's more like that, but it's not so much like that, okay? And so there's going to be a day when all the communication is happening directly, okay? So how did they get the first priesthood? Well, then we want to look at that story. So we're in Exodus again, Exodus chapter 32. So they have a first priesthood, and so we're going to look at it. It happens in chapter 32, verse 25. So in verse 25, Moses has come down from the mountain. Well, Aaron has messed up, and he's made a golden calf, and the people are worshiping the golden calf. They're not worshiping it in a nice way. They're worshiping it in a riotous way that the Egyptians. And so what the Israel people there are referring back in their memory. So how did the Egyptians do their worship? And there was probably several kinds, but one kind was just like this. You made a golden calf, and you went wild, and you had a crazy wild. And I can't say, because kids might watch this video, how crazy and wild it was. Okay, it was R and X rated. Okay, so and so that's what Moses walked into, and he tries to stop it, but it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. So in verse 25, Moses saw that the people were out of control, for Aaron had let them get out of control to be a derision among their enemies. Okay, so this is not just affecting what's happening here, it's affecting everybody, even outside the nation. Okay, oh, I gotta switch glasses. Sorry. And then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." And all the sons of Levi gathered together to him. And then he said, "Thus says the Lord, God of Israel," this has to be stopped, and it has to be stopped now and with passion. Okay, so sorry. "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." And the sons of Levi gathered. And he said to them, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, every man of you put his sword upon his thigh and go back and forth from gate to gate in the camp, and kill every man his brother, and every man his friend, and every man his neighbor." Okay, you might say, well, that sounds a little bit crazy, and that might seem like an overreaction. But what's really happening is people are just running crazy, and the people who are safe are the people in their tents. If you notice that, it's only the people out there rioting that are in danger. The people out there rioting and being crazy are in danger, and the people who are in their tents saying, "God help us," they're not in danger at all. And so there's a large group of people saying what's going on out there is wrong, and so they're protected. And the Levites are now going to start fixing it. So they go back and forth through the camp and start slaying people, and 3,000 people will die that day. And so this people, these Levites, are now going to be the priesthood. Why? Because they stood up for God in a time when standing up for God was the most important thing. Okay? Now, we're going to read what the New Testament says about their choice of priesthood, and it's not God's fault again, but it was who had to deal with the issue. And we'll see. The Levites do have a good rep, some in the Old Testament, but they also have a bad rep. So let's just see what the New Testament says about it. We're going back to Hebrews chapter 7, and we're going to realize some things about this priesthood. Okay, so we're going to see what we're going to study is we're going to study the change. Okay, so in chapter 7, and we're going to look at verse 11. Chapter 7, verse 11. "Now, if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, which we just saw, the choosing of the Levites, for on the basis of it the people received the law." Okay, so they accepted this agreement that the Levitical tribe was the priestly tribe. Now, if perfection was achievable, so then that brings up, what need was there for it to be another priest to rise according to order of Melchizedek? Okay, if they had done the job, if they had become the people they were supposed to be, if the Levites managing the law was going to make it happen, then we wouldn't need the New Testament priesthood. But then we go to verse 28. For the law appoints men as high priests who are weak. It says they're weak. They can't do it. They're not righteous enough. They're not strong enough. They don't have enough integrity. But for the law appoints men as high priests who are weak, but the word of the oath, which came after the law, appoints a son made perfect forever. So we're operating not in the Levitical, and we all know that. But that's going to change within the life of Israel. The priesthood is going to change its role, and another group of people are going to rise up and take their place. What? Yeah, well, we're going to see that on a historical basis. And everything that Moses establishes in the Levitical priesthood law is going to start morphing, changing, until it gets to the time of David's tabernacle. So we're going to be watching for that. So God already knew at that time that it was weak and it was going to break down. He's already got plan B working in the background. And then what we're going to do, the last thing we're going to look at in this video, is the fact that God already knew that the whole thing was going to break down. And so we're going to look at Deuteronomy Chapter 29. So he's been with them a little less than, I think it's 38 years. A lot of people say 40. So they were really reacting for 40 years, but they were walking through the wilderness for 38 years. And we're going to see in Deuteronomy Chapter 29 that God is going to make plan. It's going to start pointing down the road to plan X or Y or whatever. That's going to be the last covenant. So now, switch glasses. 29 verse 1. Here, these are the words of the covenant which the Lord commanded Moses to make with the sons of Israel in the land of Moab. So we can maybe call this the Moab covenant, besides the covenant he made with them at Horeb. So the first covenant that we've been talking about was made at Horeb. They've gone from Horeb to Moab, and God's already making a new covenant. And so we're going to look at the elements of that. So there's a new covenant coming, and we're going to look at 5 and 6. You can read this whole thing. You can read this chapter and the next chapter and get some good stuff. Okay, 5 and 6. I led you 40 years, so 40 years in the wilderness. Your clothes have not worn out, and your sandals not worn out on your foot. You've not eaten bread, you not drink wine or strong drink, in order that you might know that I am the Lord your God. So what did they eat? They ate manna. What did they drink? They drank water from the rock. So they drank everything right from the hand of God, and their clothes and their shoes didn't wear out. So he was obviously taking care of them for 40 years. Okay, no needs. They have no needs because God's taking care of them. Okay, and so after caring for somebody for 40 years, you know those people. Okay, and so why is he making a new covenant? Because the old one's going to go by the way. It's going to go off the rails. Okay, and it's going to go off in a bad way. So he's already making preparations for the new covenant right here. Even before they get to the promised land, he's making provisions for the new covenant. Okay, so we're going to jump to verse 10. So you stand, all of you, before the Lord your God, your chiefs, your tribes, your elders, your officers, even all the men of Israel, your little ones, your wives, and the alien who is within your camps, from the one who chops your wood to the one who draws your water, that you may enter a covenant with the Lord your God, and into his oath, which the Lord is making with you today. So what are they going to do? They're just going to stand before the Lord. That's their part of this covenant. And listen. Okay, and the God is going to make the oath. And he's going to do every part of the covenant. Just pay attention, okay? And the oath that he's making for you today, in order that he may establish you today as his people, that he may be your God, just as he spoke to you, and he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, we see the two main elements of the end game right here. That he will be their God, and they will be his people. And he's making a proclamation that these people are now in that covenant with him. Okay? If you read the rest of the chapter and the next chapter, you'll find out he knows they're going to go off the rails. They're going to go off the rails in a terrible way. He's actually going to lose them in the world, and he's going to have to draw them back out of the world to do this. So he's already pointing ahead to Christianity. And this is a prophetic statement, and this is all going to happen. And so there's certain elements here that we really need to look at, so he's going to be He's going to be their God. They're going to be his people, and it's all going to be an extension of the promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this is part of the Abrahamic promise, and you'll see all these same elements in the New Testament, book of Romans, book of Hebrews. Okay, but now we're going to look at 14 and 15. But not with you alone am I making this covenant and this oath. So God's doing this right now, and he's opening a door. He says, I'm making this covenant with you. Who else am I making this covenant with? It's important that you know this, okay? This is both with those who stand with us here with us today in the presence of the Lord our God, and with those who are not with us here today. What? So God says, I'm making this promise to you, and I'm making it to a bunch of other people that you don't even see, and you don't know who they are. Well, who are they? Well, you don't need to know who they are right now. Do we know? Yes, we know. It's people from all the nations. You read Revelation chapter 5, you'll see right there in there, it says, for every tongue, tribe, nation, he's going to pull people out. Every tongue, tribe, nation, group of people on the face of the earth, he's going to pull out his people. And so that's who he's talking to right now. So those who are in our presence today and those who are not. So this is God. He's pointing at the change. You guys thought, and I said that I wanted to bless you, to make you the people that were going to change the world. That's the point of Israel coming out. I'm going to bless you and use you as kings and priests to the whole world. That's my plan. But you're going to drop the ball, and the whole thing's going to go off the rails, and we're going to change the plans, and then eventually Jesus is going to come die, and he's going to start the new one, and then we're going to see changes in that too. So anyway, God bless you as you take this in. I look forward to speaking to you later.